Welcome to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu. On this show, we discuss how to develop the newest, nuanced hard skills needed to become an exceptional leader who can drive significant systemic change to make real impact. I work with leaders in healthcare, research, STEM, and other technical fields working toward that goal, but we also go beyond those industries. This is the second season, so we are naturally focused on the second stage of my strategic leadership pathway model, which is developing leadership identity. And today we have a great person to speak to this, Dr. Ludmila Praslova. And she's going to talk about from margin to mattering, how to lead neurodivergently. Welcome, Ludmila.
Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I look forward to our conversation. I know you have some great questions that come from your model and from this great area of research.
Absolutely. Can't wait to dig in. So, as a reminder, audience, we value evidence-based practical solutions. So be ready, take notes, reflect deeply. I always take notes, right? And identify at least one small step to further develop your hard skills muscles as you're listening to this. Now, let me introduce Ludmila for a second. Dr. Ludmila Praslova is an IO psychologist and HR professional and the author of The Canary Code, A Guide to Neurodiversity, Dignity, and Intersectional Belonging at Work, which is coming out in April. Look it up. Super exciting. I'm excited about it. She is a professor of graduate industrial organizational psychology and accreditation liaison officer at Vanguard University of Southern California. And she's a global inclusive talent strategy expert with extensive experience in global diversity and neurodiversity. Her current consulting is focused on creating organizational systems for inclusion and well-being and providing neuro-inclusion training and support to organizations such as Amazon, Bank of America, IBM, MIT, Affinity Health. And she regularly writes for Harvard Business Review, Fast Company, and Psychology Today, and is the first person to have published in Harvard Business Review from an autistic perspective. It's an excellent article. Look it up. I'm sure that she is going to be referencing it along with other things. Ludmila and I connected interestingly around this interest when she posted a really thoughtful instructional video. It was just a minute long on LinkedIn, but I was immediately drawn to it. I initially trained in neuropsychology and had worked with kids with ADHD and autism, both as a school counselor and a psychologist who conducted neuropsychological assessments and who developed recommendations for these types of accommodations for kids and adults. So now I'm naturally very interested in leadership development, consulting, and coaching with leaders of lots of backgrounds, including those with neurodiversity. And specific to this current season on developing leadership identity, this is really important because it's a way that we can really think about how does identity play into leadership development. So that's kind of where we're going to come at this from. You excited, Ludmila? Ready to go?
Absolutely. So much to talk about, so little time.
Totally. Let's start with just like terms, right? Neurodiversity is a relatively new term. We didn't used to have it. And in fact, people in the clinical and educational psychology world don't use this term as often as terms like neurodevelopmental condition. So that's a clinical and education term, right? And it's specifically used for diagnostic assessment and intervention. But I'm wondering, why do you think this term neurodiversity emerged, and especially for the world of work, and why it's important?
Yes. By the way, thank you for this generous introduction. Forgot to say that. Neurodiversity as an idea emerged in late 1990s, and a lot of it came kind of in conversations in chat rooms that when internet became kind of a new place for new thought development, specifically in autistic web spaces. And then Judy Zinger and Harvey Bloom kind of around the same time, around 1998, published using that term neurodiversity, and Judy Singer kind of defined it more from a sociological perspective, and drew a distinction between the medical perspective that some people call pathology perspective on differences like autism or ADHD or dyslexia, and neurodiversity perspective, which is acknowledgement that those differences in how we think or in our emotional intensity and our focus and perception are not necessarily bad things that need correction, but are necessary on the group levels. If you think in terms of biodiversity, it's really not good for the field to just ever have one crop. It's not good when you have just one kind of fish in the pond. It introduces all kinds of disease, vulnerability, weakness. So if you think about human groups, if we just hire one kind of people in the organization, which unfortunately does happen, and we leave out people who are different, who come up with their unusual ideas, who are more sensitive to certain conditions, we lose group level strength. So neurodiversity for humanity is like biodiversity for life. It's really something that strengthens the group. Unfortunately, for a very long time, different cultures created those neuronormativity norms in which those differences that are actually helpful on the group level became rejected and thought of poorly on the individual level.
That is a really great visual to think about the biodiversity, just like you think about like what is a healthy ecosystem in the ocean, right?
Exactly.
Biodiversity, right? So how did you get into this, Ludmila? Share a little bit about your background and how you got interested in this area.
I've always been interested in diversity, and that started actually before the neurodiversity term was there. And my first emphasis on diversity was global diversity, intercultural work, so on the level of national level cultures. And then I kind of started taking this thinking into other areas. And I always had a passion for creating organizations that don't just focus on one thing. Because kind of early in my career, I was in an organization that was very attuned to global diversity, very attuned to global level cultures. But when it came to gender inclusion, that wasn't there. So I was always like, why are they so good with one kind of difference, but really not very good with another kind of difference? How do we create organizations that are welcoming of all kinds of differences in humanity? So that was really kind of the start of a quest. I wanted to figure out how to create organizations that are not just, okay, we focus on national culture or on gender or on whatever, and then other things we just don't have the capacity, or someday that never comes. And then after working in this various aspects of diversity for a while, I again came across a situation when there was gender inclusion and actually a gender program for leadership development. Very appropriate for this conversation, but it was completely exclusionary for autistic women. And it just kind of upset me to no end, because I started my career journey with, let's bring gender inclusion in addition to national level culture inclusion. And we're still dealing with things like, okay, let's do gender inclusion, and it's still not working, because in this particular case, women were told, just change yourselves and be as manly as you can, which is unfortunately very true of many leadership programs. And any kind of different psychological approaches or more gentle ways of leadership were not welcome. And that just kind of that precipitated a personal crisis, among other variables. There were other things going on that maybe just wonder, like, what's wrong with me? Is it my cultural background? Is it my social economic background? And then I started thinking, no, there's just something deeper than that. It's like it's my actual brain wiring that's not agreeing with this particular system. And so then, then I self-diagnosed as autistic, and then I officially diagnosed. And so that kind of opened my eyes to deep level of diversity that really needs to be there for people to create organizations that are inclusive. And that's really something that precipitated development of this model of the canary code. If you include those who are most marginalized in multiple ways, most sensitive to anything negative that's going on in an organization, you really can create organizations that are welcoming to all kinds of diversity.
What a journey. And yeah, I talk about this a lot. I can really just appreciate how frustrating it is when you take some of the most marginalized people, create programs for them, and all of a sudden the programs themselves are not supportive. They're more about like fix you kind of programs, which is highly frustrating and insulting. And then also doesn't take into consideration the diversity within the group itself that you've decided to sort of randomly choose around, one area of diversity, but not like really think through the entire picture of whole identity, right? So definitely appreciate you speaking to that. And
Yes.
so I really like what you said here. My brain did not agree with the system. Love that, because the system pushes out people whose brains do not agree with the system.
Exactly.
Right. But to think about it in that way, to think about just because somebody's brain doesn't agree with the system doesn't mean there's something wrong with that person's brain, right? Or who they are. There is something about the system that is not inclusive or accepting enough to feel like you can belong in that system, if that's the situation, right? Is that kind of how you're thinking?
Yes, you can't belong, you can't matter, you get pushed aside and you start doubting that, okay, maybe in other situations it was a fluke, and maybe in this situation I really am not cut out for those things. So it can definitely do a number on a person.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are going to take a little ad break here. When we come back, I really want to dig into the connection between neurodiversity, leading neurodiversity, diversely, and developing this leadership identity. Like, what is the crossover? So you're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and our guest, Dr. Ludmila Kraslova. And we air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. If you would like to join our online audience and ask questions that we can answer in real time, we are here. We will answer in real time. You can find us on LinkedIn or on YouTube at TalkRadio.nyc. And we'll be right back with Ludmila in just a moment.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on TalkRadio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and with our guest, Dr. Ludmila Praslava. So we just got done sort of defining how did the term neurodiversity come to be? Why did it come to be? Why are we focusing on it? How do you see this idea of neurodiversity connecting with our season on developing leadership identity? How do you think about leadership identity and where neurodiversity fits in, Ludmila?
Oh my goodness, so many interactions. And so the way I think about identity development is ultimately it's social psychology. It's a social relational process. Leadership is also a social process. So we don't develop identity in a vacuum or leadership. Both are formed through our relationships with our various social niches, starting at home, at school, various groups that we interact with. And the feedback we get is a big part of this process. So there are really two pieces, the societal piece and individual piece, and then in between those. So if we think about the societal piece, we know there are leadership schemas. There's a lot of research that people have particular expectations. When we ask people to close their eyes, and you can just do it and say, so what is your ideal leader, or what is your finance leader? And then we can ask, okay, what is your education leader mental image? And you might get certain differences, but most people, let's say if we ask for a leader in finance, might look a little bit different than a leader in education. The second is more likely to, have more of a feminine characteristics. But for the most part, it's a very loud, outgoing, masculine image that most people will get in their leadership schema. So if you don't match any of those characteristics, it's very hard for people to see you as a leader. So the more difference you have from that schema that people have about leaders, the harder it is for people to see you as a leader. So it influences leadership emergence in the group because of just who people pay attention to because of their schemas. And that's usually the taller and the louder people, at least in the American culture and most Western cultures. And if you are someone who doesn't match on just one characteristic, you're less likely to emerge. And if you don't match on multiple characteristics, you're less and less likely to be naturally looked at as a leader. It doesn't mean it's impossible. But it takes more effort from you or a stronger crisis to override those kinds of perceptions and biases that most people just are not aware of consciously. They just kind of do it. And so then when you get this kind of feedback from your environment, you naturally start positioning yourself in a way that the society is pushing you into. So your leadership identity is going to be colored by those experiences. Obviously, there are ways to work on it and get through it, but it's not easy. You can build self-confidence, but you might do a little bit more intentional work or take more of a zigzaggy path to leadership because the traditional ladder keeps pushing you down. So you kind of have to, climb the wall or do something that's a little bit different and, take the a different path. So I'm happy to elaborate on those things as well.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely. I really love how you conceptualize that. How identity and leadership are both social processes. And the messages that we receive about leadership is what we start believing about leadership. And you have two paths then, right? You either must conform to the idea of the messages that you receive about what leadership is like. And the risk to that is obviously you feeling completely disconnected from the role you're trying to take on or to display out there in the world to feel accepted as a leader. Or the opposite is to reject becoming a leader altogether, or tell yourself you can never move into leadership spaces because of what you've been told, right?
Yes. And it's very hard. So collectively, we need to work on changing our attitudes, changing the role models, but then changing the definition of leadership and how it's seen. I think it's happening because the world is becoming more diverse, but it's not something that's going to happen very easily on itself. We still need to work on intentionally showing different kinds of role models and trying to change those kinds of biases. But as individuals, we can also do a few things. If we just kind of give up, it's obviously not going to help anything, even though not everyone has to be a leader. Some people are very happy doing other things. So people are not required to be a leader to have value in life. However, if there is something that you just kind of inclined to, but society doesn't necessarily see you that way, there are a few things we can do to build our leadership self-efficacy and the confidence in our ability to lead, which comes through experience. There's something to mindset and psyching yourself, but nothing is strong enough to replace the actual experience of success. But if we define leadership in more than one way and select our environments and lead in environments that are more accepting of different types of leadership, or start with ERG, start with your community group, become leader that is a mentor. It's a different form of leadership. Thought leadership is something that I've been talking about. So you can build your leadership self-efficacy in different ways. It doesn't have to be positional, hierarchical within an organization, even though ideally, of course, I would love to see more representation there. But there are ways to develop your identity. So we can design our experience through that. And then we can also just be aware of those negative thoughts. It's not fun that we have to do it, because it takes a lot of energy out of us to just keep reminding ourselves, don't be brought down by all those things that happen. But to a certain extent, we can do it. We can direct our thoughts, even though, again, ideally, I would love to see social change that would not put this extra psychological tax on already marginalized people of working through all those things that society throws at us.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot to work through. One of the things that that we work on in my Tower Scope Leadership Academy, as well as just like through coaching and consulting, is helping women, especially women from marginalized backgrounds, tease apart like what part of this whole situation is me and what am I bringing here, both in terms of strengths and potential pitfalls or liabilities, blind spots, whatever that is. But then what part are those societal messages that I've incorporated that actually are not mine, that I'm sort of believing, right? And that is causing harm to me that I need to let go of or unlearn or whatever, right? And then what part is the other person and their thing? And being able to tease that apart is not easy. But once you're able to sort of learn how to do that better and better, that kind of thing helps anybody. I mean, it helps every single person be more effective in engaging in any kind of situation, right? Just to be able to know yourself, understand and assess the situation, and try to figure out like, okay, that part is not about me, right? But I really appreciate what you said, that there's an additional burden on people with marginalized backgrounds, that like, is it really fair to add that additional burden to learn all of this stuff and to try to unlearn or separate or work even harder to engage people around? That's a lot of work.
Yes, it's a lot of work. It's unfair. So the whole thing of unfairness is an additional thing to work through, and but that again is not something that we can wish away, but we can work it away slowly and collectively.
Yeah. So
by changing norms.
let's get into that a little bit. So you know, what are the kinds of things that we need to be thinking about more in order to create a system where we don't have to work so hard to undo, unlearn, separate at least marginalized leaders, and make it a little bit more equitable how we engage in embracing lots of different kinds of leadership and accepting that? Like, what's the path to that?
There are 4 chapters on this in my book. So
Yes.
let me try to narrow this down. So I think one thing that would help generally all organizations and all people is to move away from this very rigid idea of cultural fit or just generally personal fit, and just this one model of what human being is allowed to be, and more specifically what a leader is allowed to be. If we just evaluate those norms and say, okay, so this is a core value, this is really important, but this is, just something that people did in 1950s and we just never took care of getting rid of it. So there's a lot of just kind of baggage in cultures that is unnecessary, that's making lives harder for people. So whether it's appearance expectations or how people define professional behavior, like you're never allowed to cry. So if you ever cry in public, like you're done, there's a big cross on you. You know what? That person can have huge talent and huge love for organization, to the point that this person cried in front of others because they love their organization and their coworkers so much. So let's just not cut out people who are passionate about things and have intense emotional experience, because you're going to get rid of some of your literally strongest, most committed contributors if you do this. So evaluate those norms and what we consider fit and whether those things actually make sense. And again, there is values fit, but then people throw all kinds of personal biases into what they define as culture fit. So that's one thing that all organizations can do. And for leadership, just redefine of what constitutes leadership and maybe go away from this you either fit in this one size that we just decided on and that's been passed down through who knows how many generations. And maybe leadership in this kind of world in which we live in looks, sounds differently than it did before. And maybe we do need multiple modes of leadership to address the levels of complexity that we're dealing with.
Awesome. Let's stop there. We're going to return right after this ad break to get into what are those benefits of seeing leadership in different ways and thinking about leaders in different ways. You're listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Branco, and our guest, Dr. Ludmila Praslova. We air on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Feel free to drop us a line right now and we can answer you back. on YouTube or LinkedIn at TalkRadio.nyc, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
What really drives success in business? Introducing Intangify, the show that explores the intangible assets that create value and growth. I'm Matthew Asbell, your host and an attorney focused on innovation. Join me Fridays at noon Eastern to discover how innovation, culture, and other intangibles shape thriving companies, from startups to established businesses. We'll share strategies to unleash your business's true potential. Tune in live on TalkRadio.nyc Fridays at noon Eastern and Intangify your business today.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on TalkRadio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back on the Hard Skills with me and Dr. Proslova on leading neurodivergently. So we just got done talking about some things that organizations can do to start adjusting and leaning into new ways of being and doing and letting go of some old unhelpful norms, and those norms that actually don't meet the needs of today's global, ever-changing experience in the world of work. So you mentioned redefining leadership is important and letting go of our expectational or norm baggage. Let's talk about the benefits of leading neurodivergently specifically. Why should we embrace this?
Well, I wish we didn't need a business case for everything, because I prefer going with just a human case. It's the right thing to do. However, people do want their business case. So if we think about modern organizations, we are talking about challenges such as dealing with complexity. We're talking about challenges such as decision-making in the uncertain world and saving puzzles that never existed until this morning. And we talk about paying attention to emotional well-being of employees, of leading with empathy. And many leaders are burned out because they're expected to do all of this. And it just becomes so that leadership is becoming increasingly stressful and almost impossible thing to do to meet all those competing expectations. And burnouts levels, the intentions to quit their jobs are very high among leaders in various positions. But let's think about it in a different way. We also talk more and more about leadership teams. So when we have leadership teams in which people work with their strength and focus maybe 75% of their time on something that they're really, really, really good at, which is whether it's dealing empathetically with employees or say solving those intellectual puzzles, whatever is their preferred mode of functioning, because we all have different modes of functioning. If we create, again, diverse teams, thinking about diversity as a group level phenomenon, We can get people who are really, really good at something, dedicating more time to that thing that they're really good at, and then other people also doing the thing that they're really good at. And that is much better than splitting one person in 45 different ways, of which they only get to work maybe 10 or 25% of time with their top strengths. So when we bring people who have all those different, we call it spiky profiles of abilities, they're really, really good at something and they're not necessarily best at everything. And we capitalize on their spikes of talents, whatever it is. And then we create a complementary leadership team that creates a much more effective approach to leadership on the organizational level than having, 3 clones. You don't want people who are the same. We need different strengths to address the complexity and different types of problems.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yeah. Capitalize on spikes of talents like that. More and more, we do need to function as leadership teams, and many people from a variety of different backgrounds have gotten really good at learning how to function on teams, because they might have more of a collaborative or collectivistic mindset, which, by the way, before used to be devalued, or not even seen. I think about women who do a lot of this unrecognized emotional labor of getting people together to build support or cohesion, or make collaborative decisions. And the work of DE&I work is often this kind of work, and it's often undervalued, unseen work, and yet those are the very skills that we need more than ever in the top leadership teams of organizations in order to meet all of those demands that you just mentioned, right? And so why are we leaving talent on the table, right? Why? You're not going to be highly competitive if you're leaving all of that talent on the table.
Exactly. It's really not a good long-term approach for organizations. It may feel like something, but it's so much easier to be homogenous right now because I'm stressed out right now. But you know what? You're going to be stressed out, a year from now and 5 years from now. And if you don't develop this long-term strength, it eventually will get to you.
Absolutely. And you just think about all of the leaders now who are extremely stressed out, burned out, stretched thin, exhausted, and how better it would feel for them to have a team around them that picked up the areas that you mentioned that may not be a strength, or may not be an interest, or may require way more effort than they want to put into something, but somebody else is like super passionate about it. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. So tell us a little bit about the frameworks that you think about in your book. You said you had 4 chapters on this. We spoke a little bit about, redefining leadership, and letting go of those the expectational baggage. What else should organizations be thinking about if they're going to lean into sort of some of this team leadership, and getting better at more, an inclusive, healthy workplace?
Oh goodness, again, it's there's quite a lot. But if you think about leadership pipelines, I want organizations to get rid of the term not a leadership material, because you don't know what kind of leadership you're going to need tomorrow. And in the changing world and in the changing situations, very often you will need very different kinds of leaders. And I think we need different kinds of leaders now than we needed 4 years ago. And also, very often, this idea of, this 9 grid, who has potential, who does not have potential, it's so influenced by bias that at the very least, I want those tools to be used with a lot of caution. But I think we'll lose a lot of people on this early stage of identifying who gets into the leadership pipeline and into the leadership development programs. And then sometimes they could create as, the special program on the side, but it's not necessarily taken seriously by all organizations. And sometimes it kind of leads in this a very particular ceiling bound track that is not the same as like the leadership pipeline for everyone else. So I just want to think about the bigger pipeline and more branches of the pipeline that are aligned more with individual level talents, and think that there are different kinds of leadership and different kinds of leadership potential. Because again, this idea of who is leadership material is very much influenced by all the biases, and also the tightrope that's often used when we talk about gender, that women are expected to be just this bit of assertive but never aggressive. And there's a very fine line between you're too weak versus you're too much. And then when you add other intersectionalities, it's even harder. So I want people to be very aware of those biases in identifying leadership potential.
Absolutely. It's a book from 1992, Breaking the Glass Ceiling, where they use the term the narrow band of acceptable behavior for women, and that's exactly what you referred to. I'm curious about women with autism, women with ADHD. What are these sort of additional intersectional challenges for them when they're thinking about leadership?
Well, again, there are very specific biases when it comes to autistic people. People don't even imagine women, and then they have all those ideas that are formed by, let's say, media and movie portrayals. They're not necessarily aligned with the leadership. And then ADHD dyslexia might be a little bit more, but then there's really particular entrepreneurial type of leadership rather than hierarchical in organization. So there's this kind of bias. And when it comes to autistic people, it's more like, okay, that's an individual contributor and never beyond individual contributor. So there are very specific biases, even though we do have incredible examples of all kinds of people in all kinds of positions, but this typecasting is an issue. And then the one size fits all leadership imagery is also difficult. So let's say you are a woman who is from ADHD community. Women are expected to organize everyone else. And if people think, oh, this person has ADHD, so she won't be able to even organize herself, that really pigeonholes you, even though this person could have incredible skills that actually make her more organized than others. And there are autistic people who can do all kinds of, like, if you look at me right now, you're not going to think I'm autistic, because you don't usually associate it with someone who's been a university professor for years and has zero stage fright. But I do have my things where they're not stage fright, but people just imagine things that are not true because of stereotypes. So there are actual difficulties that are associated with whether being autistic, or many people can have both ADHD and autistic traits. But when people from our neurodivergent communities kind of interact with organizations, there's additional criticisms, additional expectations, and also the lifelong bullying and lifelong people telling you like everything about you is wrong. So none of those things help. There's a lot of abuse and bullying that's been happening throughout our lives, which is yet another baggage you don't want. And then we're dealing with those situations that just trigger our psychological response. And many people say that in addition to being autistic, for example, you also have complex PTSD. The same thing with ADHD, because you're constantly criticized. Or let's say dyslexic people are always told all kinds of negative things about their abilities, which are not true, but it's a perception of their abilities by other people. So there's a layer of actual difficulties, there's a layer of trauma, and there's a layer of bias that's kind of specific to each type of neurodivergent group. But there's also a lot of overlap in that all of those things tend to be traumatizing and damaging to our self-identity.
Absolutely. And when it's damaging to your self-identity, you lose out on opportunities, but so does the organization. And some of those opportunities are that people who have learned to overcome or work through and still push through those challenges have some strengths the rest of us do not, has not had to face that. Some of it is constantly being able to translate back and forth from the neurotypical way of being and doing and appearing to, what feels natural to you. That's a translation process, right? And that kind of thing that is being strengthened in your ability to do that is, fairly impressive. And a lot of us don't ever use our brains that way to be able to do that. The other is just sometimes the resiliency and thick skin to face these constant challenges. If you're able to sort of face them and come out the other end with something that a framework or a way of addressing and protecting or supporting others who are going through that, that brings a lot to an organization and to other people who just have not learned how to do those kinds of things or face those kinds of challenges in adversity. So again, we're just missing out on opportunities here, I think. So when we come back, let's talk about some opportunities that you all can be thinking about in terms of supporting those who lead neurodivergently. Again, you are listening to The Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and with our guest, Dr. Ludmila Praslova. We'll be right back. Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on TalkRadio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on TalkRadio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Welcome back to the Hard Skills with me, Dr. Mira Brancu, and with our guest, Dr. Ludmila Praslova. Oh my gosh, the time has flown, and I want another hour with you, Ludmila.
Let's do this.
Okay, but seriously, we've touched on a lot of things today. We talked about, the challenges to why we aren't currently able to see people with neurodiversity in leadership roles, and also the challenges they experience with being seen and accepted in those leadership roles. We've talked about what organizations can do and what to think about. What is one takeaway that you would like people to leave with today that that is important to you?
Well, there's something that we can do as individuals and as groups, and that is pay attention to those cognitive schemas and how they bias our evaluation. So let's say when you're hiring and you just kind of think, oh, this person is not going to be culture fit, ask yourself why. Or if you're saying, oh, this person is not a leadership material, ask yourself why and check if those societally shaped schemas and biases are influencing you, and then bring it up to your group. Bring it up to your search committee or other people who are involved in the hiring process, and bring it up to your entire organization. Maybe you could create forms that explicitly remind people to check for those biases. And that might be something that can eventually help people to become collectively less and less influenced by those schemes. So challenge yourself and challenge whatever is your influence realm to create a more inclusive definition of leadership.
Love it. Okay, so everyone that's listening, I want you to find 4 other people and you each write down, what is my definition of leadership? Write down your definition, compare notes, and ask each other, why do we think that? Right? Brilliant. Okay. So where can people find out more about your work, and especially what will they learn from your book, The Canary Code?
Well, I hope the Canary Code is going to be something that will help leaders of all the different levels, decision makers, and individuals who are also trying to build their careers, even though it's specifically for CEOs, leaders, HR managers, but it's also written in a way that hopefully everyone can benefit. And it's hopefully a guide to creating organizations that are structurally more inclusive. So this is something that you can practically use in your everyday work. How do you work with people who puzzle you? How do you change this puzzle from stress and threat to something positive? To what do we do with those differences? And how do we collectively create better organizations? So that's the goal of the book, to help us to, again, in whatever is our realm of influence, which might be bigger than we think, whether it's through ERGs or we are on top of the company, there is some kind of level of influence that we can help create more inclusive and kinder workplaces that also support everyone's well-being. So canaries in the coal mine were real. That it's not a story or a folk tale. It's the actual canaries that went into coal mines for decades and finally were replaced by carbon monoxide detectors. But there's nothing wrong with canary. Canary is not broken. Sensitivity is a feature and it's helpful. And if canary can breathe safely, everyone can breathe safely. So the idea is to help us to create organizations that are safe for people who are more sensitive to toxic bullying, negative, dangerous environments. And when we do that, we create better environments for everybody. So that's where the title comes from. That's why the canary code.
I'm so glad that you explained the title. I love it. You can really relate to that experience. And just to put a real fine point on something that you mentioned, it doesn't matter what position you're in, we all have a sphere of influence around us. And you can pick up this book and think about, what is my sphere of influence? How can I apply these regardless of the role that I'm in, right? So we've learned a lot today. Please share with us on LinkedIn what you learned. This is where we live, LinkedIn. The talk radio and the hard skills is in a lot of places, but LinkedIn is where we live. So share with us what you learned. What was your takeaway? If you would like to explore how I can help you with leadership and team development services, check us out at www.gotowerscope.com. The application process for our 2024 TowerScope Leadership Academy cohort is now open. There's both an annual membership and a 12-week option. And we make decisions as we begin interviewing. And you need to apply by January 22nd if you want to get in for this year. So please do. Audience, what did you take away? Please share with us. And thank you to Talk Radio for hosting. I am Dr. Mira Brancu, the host of the Hard Skills Show. This is Dr. Ludmila Praslova. Thank you for joining us today, Ludmila, and have a great rest of your day, wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you, Ludmila.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a wonderful conversation. And if you ever want to talk more, I'm happy to figure something out.
We are going to continue. Yes. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much.